That's right, you can also call these vol au vent if you're French, which you're not. But regardless of what you call them, these beautiful pastry cups are so versatile and definitely a technique any serious cook needs to know. So let's go ahead and get started, and for this you're going to need some frozen puff pastry, which is very easy to find these days in the frozen section in the supermarket. And it usually comes folded in like 3 or 4 panels. So what we want to do is just let that stuff thaw enough so we can separate it. And I'm going to do that right on a Silpat lined baking sheet. And before we start cutting, we're going to go ahead and brush these with an egg wash. And one of the secrets of this technique is a double layer of puff pastry. So this egg wash is going to help seal those 2 pieces of dough together. So we'll brush that over. And pretty much the whole key to these puff pastry shells is to work with this stuff as close to frozen as possible. And that's going to allow for the maximum height on these. And also we want them to bake up kind of straight. They don't have to be perfect, as mine certainly weren't. But bottom line, we want to work with this dough as cold as possible. And then we'll go ahead and grab a round pastry cutter. Obviously the size is up to you. This technique's going to work whether you're making big shells or small shells. And what I'm going to do is cut out 2 circles. And obviously remove the excess dough. Unlike a biscuit dough or a pie dough, you can't really re-roll puff pastry and have it work the same. But don't discard it. Put it back in the freezer. There's things we can do with that. I'll touch on that on the blog. But anyway, we're going to cut our 2 pieces of dough. And then we're going to take a slightly smaller cutter and punch out the center of one of the pieces. Just right in the center like that. And then we'll lay that over the top of the other piece. And we'll carefully try to pull that cutter away with the minimum amount of damage, as we don't want to mash the edges of this puff pastry together. All right, so use a very light touch. Try not to press and squeeze this dough together too much. And all these directions are going to make a lot more sense once this bakes. If you are too rough with this stuff and smush all the edges together, it just won't raise as high and straight as if you didn't, okay? So be careful. So that's basically the method I like, doing the pieces separately. There is one alternative method you can use where you cut the first piece of pastry, but you don't remove it from the cutter. You just press another piece and then take the smaller cutter and cut out the center. And of course, we're going to make sure we go down at least through the first layer with that center cut. And as you'll notice, that one's next to the Silpat logo. So we'll keep an eye on the one in that position, because as you'll see, that one ended up cooking a little differently because we used a different technique. So kind of interesting, or not. But anyway, that is another way you can do it. And then these are pretty much ready for the oven, although I do like to give them a little more egg wash before they go in. All right, we want these to have that signature shiny, beautiful golden brown finish. So let's give them a little extra egg wash. And once that's set, we'll go ahead and transfer those into the center of a very well preheated 400-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes. That, of course, will depend on the size, but about 20 minutes or so until they look like this. They should have risen magnificently. And like I said, have a beautiful brown finish. And because my puff pastry was a little more thawed than I wanted to, these did not bake up perfectly straight. And that's simply because the edges of those 2 pieces of puff pastry got smeared together when we cut it. And that prevented part of it from rising as high as the other. Although when these things are filled, nobody will care. As you've heard me say before, it's the imperfections that make this kind of thing look perfect. So I don't know about you, but I was very happy with these. And at that point you might think you're done, but you're not. These are not ready to use yet. You want to let these cool in the warm oven. So what I like to do is just open the door, put them back in, leave the door open. We don't want these to continue cooking. We just want them to cool slowly in that warm oven. And that's going to help them dry out a little more and just be a little crisper and a little nicer. So I let mine cool in there for about an hour or so, at which point they are officially ready to use. Of course, we're going to need to remove the top though so we can fill them. And what works best for this is a small serrated knife, which almost nobody has. So what works very well would be a steak knife. Those are usually kind of thin and pointy and have a little bit of serrade to the blade. So we'll just go around, carefully cut out that center, and that puff pastry shell is ready to fill. So a very, very simple technique if you know the trick. And of course, what you fill these with is up to you. You are the Kubla Khan of your vol au vent. Many of you saw me use these for lobster Newburg recently, but there's just so many other fillings you could use. From other savory things like beef stew. You could make your chicken and biscuits and use this instead of biscuits. And then obviously there's countless dessert options. Fresh fruit whipped cream, maybe a vanilla custard with chocolate ganache. Oh man, that would be good. But anyway, I really do hope you give those a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.